Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to, Tim Pool destroys woke comedian. It's fine. You can start the clip at this point if you're doing your response videos,
Every once in a while when I'm on the internet.com and I'm scrolling for things to get angry at in order to make videos about, I end up stumbling across something that I genuinely didn't believe was a thing anymore. And a perfect example of that is Adam Conover, this human being. I did not believe he actually existed anymore, and if you guys don't remember Adam, he used to be the guy that was on College Humor that used to do a show called Adam Ruins Everything, where Adam would put himself opposite a myth that was widely believed to be true, say, well, actually, and then he would go on to debunk that myth. And this gave Adam some form of credibility because what he was doing was looking into things that we just bought into as basically sacred truths and tearing them down by doing the due diligence necessary to prove that that myth was in fact wrong. Well, now Adam has revealed himself to be a genuine basic progressive loser, and this is exactly how he presented himself on Tim Pool's The Culture War, where honestly he just made a fool of himself time and time again. Now, to be 100% clear, Tim Pool was not perfect in his representation of himself throughout the course of this segment. I will talk about an instance where I just don't think he did a very good job. However, overall, the highlights of this particular video are absolutely clear because Adam was doing all the basic progressive tricks and tactics in order to avoid actually, having a normal, rational conversation with somebody who is opposing him. And by the way, all of these tricks are in fact intentional. This is not Adam actually being dumb. He is playing dumb in order to avoid accountability, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Rubesa Ozturk, who, she wrote an op-ed. The only thing that anybody has even claimed that she's done is she wrote an extremely mild op-ed in her campus newspaper asking that the college, sort of consider being supportive of the Palestinian cause in some vaguely defined way. Yeah. Her visa's revoked. She, we've all seen the video, right? People come and grab her and literally put her into a vehicle.
She was arrested.
They're wearing masks, right? She's stopped in an alarming way on the street, right?
It's not like they filmed that and published that footage though. That was security camera footage.
Yeah, but they did it in a. If you want a student, like a young woman, there's other ways to arrest them than have 6 people show up wearing masks, surround her in a pincer formation. It's designed to create terror.
So I happen to be a very negative person myself, so I thought it would just be perfect to start this video on a negative point for Tim Pool, who I've met a couple of times, I get along with. I was actually recently on Timcast IRL, had a great time and whatnot, but this portion of the conversation, Tim did not represent himself very well, because essentially when they were talking about whether or not it was violative of the First Amendment for the Trump administration to revoke the visas of people in the United States who are either anti-Israel or pro-Hamas, aka participating in what would be protected speech for a United States citizen. They ended up in this weird place where Tim was saying, well, we never really had freedom of speech in this country anyway. There were always restrictions on the First Amendment, and honestly and genuinely, I just did not like the angle that Tim took in this particular conversation, especially when there was a great avenue for debate that would have basically wrecked everything that Adam had to say about this particular topic. So let's play a little bit of that so you can understand what I'm talking about.
The issue is, do not come to our country and tell us what to do. That's it. If you're here as a guest of this nation, you do not start rallying its people in opposition to the will of the voters and what the government is doing.
I mean, I really thought the point of America was, if freedom of speech was like a main value here, that I think that's why people come here. It's why I like living here, because I always felt that, hey, I can express an opinion, especially about U.S. foreign policy, and not have anything happen to me. So that's a right that only citizens have. And you think America should be a country where if you are not literally an American citizen, if you express any opinion about U.S. foreign policy? I mean, and we both agree the opinion she expressed was pretty mild. It wasn't like a very inflammatory opinion, right? It was like, it's pretty mainstream political opinion to have. It conflicts with U.S. interests about the Suez Canal. I still don't really understand that point, but let's just say that it does.
It does.
That should be grounds for being forcibly removed from the country.
Well, because if we go back several administrations, that's not been the case ever. I mean, look at New York in the 2000s when the Bush administration rounded people up. And well, I'm sorry, it wasn't Bush, during the Bush years. And they put 200 people in like a bus. They locked them in a bus cage.
Yeah, that was bad.
That's the country you grew up in. The idea that these things haven't been happening. George Carlin got arrested for swearing. We had blasphemy laws on the book.
Yeah, and it was bad. And then we said, oh, we shouldn't do that anymore.
And it never changed. The idea that you think you grew up in a nation where you could say whatever you wanted is an absurdity. George Carlin went to jail for swearing.
And that was good, you think?
No, it wasn't.
And you think it's good that Rumeysa Öztürk is being forced to leave the country.
She's not a citizen. So she's on a conditional visa as conditioned by the INA and the existing administration and the will of the voters.
So first of all, there have been a bunch of different violations of the First Amendment throughout American history, and as Adam says, and I will agree, a bunch of those violations are viewed as bad things by people who are defenders of freedom of speech. By the way, Adam Conover is not a defender of freedom of speech. Make no mistake about that.
The challenge with free speech, let's go back to the beginning of this country. Blasphemy laws were on the books after they even had the First Amendment.
So
they literally said you can't blaspheme. We would say that's not free speech, but how did you have a First Amendment if you arrested people for blaspheming? My point is, and this is an anarchist philosophy, the laws of the country are dictated by those with the power to enforce it. That's why it used to be illegal to put a pie on your windowsill, but even though it's still illegal, nobody arrests you for it. So free speech does change throughout the generations.
Of course.
We never grew up in an era. We never had a time in our lives where you had true free speech the way the absolutists want it to be.
But also, and I think this is very important to note, and it was pointed out in the chat, however, this was a pre-recorded video. It was not a live stream. What Tim is citing for some of these instances as violations of the First Amendment are just factually not violations. When he talks about blasphemy laws that were put in at the state level after the founding of this country, that in reality was not a violation of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And the reason for that is because prior to the 14th Amendment, the First Amendment did not apply to the states. In fact, none of the amendments specifically applied to the states, even though a bunch of states had already added them into their state constitutions. The First Amendment was expressly written at the time that it was written to apply to the federal government. That's why it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or abridging the freedom of speech. It doesn't say there shall be no government law. And again, that interpretation wasn't set down by the Supreme Court until post the 14th Amendment, and again, this is referred to as the incorporation doctrine. However, what Tim seems to also fail to realize and fail to point out towards Adam Conover that's absolutely crucial when we're talking about revoking people's visas and whatnot is the fact that deportation under United States Supreme Court precedent that goes back well over 100 years is not in any way, shape, or form a form of punishment. It is not something that is a penalty for a crime. And again, we have case after case after case throughout American history that says that removing somebody's visa, deporting somebody, is an administrative procedure, not a consequence for a crime. Therefore, you do not require a trial to be deported from the United States of America. Again, you don't have to commit an additional crime while in this nation in order to be deported. And as I've talked about before, if the Supreme Court were to change this, if the Supreme Court were to say that due process in terms of immigration, which you are entitled to even in immigration cases, includes a trial as if it was a criminal offense, we would actually never be able to deport anybody for any reason, because the whole process of going through a trial for somebody who you're just trying to determine whether they're a citizen or not and whether they're authorized to be here is absolute madness in every possible way. Now, that being said, if somebody were to actually receive a punishment, we're talking being jailed, we're talking being fined, we're talking being sent to prison based on their speech, whether it's against the United States or a foreign government, I would be 100% unambiguously opposed to that because in reality, the First Amendment does in fact apply to people within the United States and under our jurisdiction. It does not just apply to American citizens, but because deportation is not considered a punishment, and it can't by any logical standard be considered a punishment because it would make deportation damn near impossible in this country. Therefore, this is just not what is going on factually in these particular cases. Now, with that being said, would I like or do I like the Trump administration revoking visas based on the idea that these people are criticizing a United States ally, in this particular case, Israel? Now, even though I'm clearly and obviously a shill for the nation of Israel, I'm paid for by the Jews, according to many of you out there in the audience, I actually don't support the Trump administration doing this. Now, of course, there are specific details in specific cases on whether or not we want this person or that person in the country, regardless, whether or not they're endorsing a terrorist organization versus just condemning the nation of Israel. But as a general principle, as a rule, I don't like the Trump administration determining who gets to be here and who gets to not be here based on the idea that they may or may not support a foreign country. And to be clear, the foreign country that we're talking about in these instances is overwhelmingly, most of the time, the nation of Israel. That being said, being affiliated with certain political movements throughout the course of American history has been grounds for you to have your visa revoked, has been grounds for you to be excluded from the United States of America. In fact, right now in the United States of America, we bar Communist Party members from coming to this country, from obtaining visas, from actually becoming American citizens. And I want to be 100% clear about this. I definitely support doing that. This country would be a lot better if we stopped importing so many different communists from around the world in order to train the American youth in order to hate the United States government, hate our country, hate our values. But unfortunately, that is not being enforced to the degree that it should be, that it has in the past. So that's where we're at. And obviously, there are notable exceptions for people who were members of the Communist Party that happen to be fleeing communism and all that. But again, that is detailed and outlined in law. And obviously, those same standards can apply to people who are directly supporting or pledging loyalty or doing something for foreign terrorist organizations. But to be clear, to the narrow extent that they're just criticizing the nation of Israel, I do not favor revoking their visa based on those grounds, even though, again, it is not technically a violation of the First Amendment because deportation is not technically a punishment. That's the argument that I think Tim Pool should have put forward, but he didn't, so let us move on to another topic.
He could have enforced this law as he saw it on anybody. He could have enforced it on a comedian, right? Who's in town and goes on stage and says, "Hey, you know what? I disagree with this or that." Or, "Hey, I just did shows in
Canada.
what?
You're not from Canada.
No, but I just did shows in the UK and Amsterdam, and I made fun of UK politics. I made fun of American politics.
You wouldn't dare make fun of Islam, though. Go to the UK and mock Islam. Do it.
Well, I don't have any jokes about Islam.
So this right here is one of my favorite parts of the entire conversation, where they end up going from the First Amendment topic that I covered previous into Adam saying, well, I go around the world and I tell jokes. I make a comedy because I am comedian. Me, I'm comedy boy. And Tim says, well, you wouldn't dare do that about Islam. And then Adam acts a little bit confused. And then Tim responds to him by saying, go to the UK and make jokes about Islam. And then Adam says, I don't have any jokes about Islam. Adam Conover, professional comedian, alleged comedian, actual political propagandist, says that he just can't think of any jokes about Islam, a religion of over 1 billion people with a bunch of different weird and kooky practices that you could make fun of. But Adam just has nothing on that particular topic. And for those of you who think that Adam Conover doesn't talk about religion, doesn't mock religion, I just want to point out that people have highlighted that there's an episode of Adam Ruins Everything where he talks about how Christmas isn't actually Christian, it's all pagan and whatnot, and he ends up going after a bunch of different Christian traditions. Now again, I'm not talking about whether or not that is true or false. I could give a damn about whether or not Christmas has a bunch of pagan totems involved in the modern celebration of the holiday, but the fact is, Adam would not make any of those observations about modern Islam, and that is perfectly represented by him saying that he just has no jokes about Islam. There is no comedy to be had over that particular situation. Adam Conover couldn't possibly think of joke related to Muslim. How could he possibly do that?
Go to the UK and mock Islam. Do it.
Well, I don't have any jokes about Islam.
Why not? They got Pakistani grooming games raping little girls. Why won't you go to the UK?
What?
What? I don't think it's any very funny. I don't have any jokes about it. I'm so confused. What? Oh, Timothy, you've confused me. My brain doesn't operate right. So this is one of the things that I find incredibly annoying about the left wing is that whenever you bring up a counterpoint to them, they have a couple of tactics. One is the quick deflection onto something else. The other one is to repeat your statement back to you as a way to stall for time. This is them buffering. But then there's this one, which I find to be even more annoying, where they pretend that they can't possibly understand the direction that you're going in. They can't possibly understand what you're saying. And that is exactly what Adam Conover is doing. He's like, what? Joke? Comedy? I am comedian, but you're saying I could do comedy about Islam? What? Shut up, Adam. Honestly, genuinely, from me to you, from the actual Justice Warrior, from Sean Fitzgerald to Adam Conover, the dope from Adam Ruins Everything, just shut the hell up if you're going to be this weak and this cowardly. This is probably one of Tim's best moments that he's had in years, where he ends up posing this question to Adam Conover, and we get this ridiculous, what? Me brain no think of joke about Islam. How could I possibly make comedy about that in UK? What? How do we even get to this topic? What?
Okay.
What?
Why won't you go to the UK and make jokes about Islam?
I don't think it's very funny. I don't have any jokes about it. I'm so confused.
What?
Dude.
Okay, let me help unconfuse you. Are there jokes that can be made about Islam? Yes or no?
Wait, I don't
Yes
want
or no?
to. I don't want to go down
Are you
this
scared?
particular rabbit
Oh,
hole.
no. You're terrified. You're a hypocrite.
What?
Are there jokes you can make about Islam? Muhammad banged a little girl, right?
I'm really baffled.
Whoa, come on. You're terrified of the subject. I'm not.
No, I'm not.
Again, I really do appreciate Tim for calling him out on this, because he's like, look, are there jokes that you could make about Islam, yes or no? And Adam's like, but what? I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. What? Comedy about Islam? Me no understand it. What?
In the UK, you can be jailed for making jokes about Islam or even bring up the grooming gangs. There are people who go online and pointed out that a stabbing was carried out by a Muslim, and they got arrested for it. I'll bet you $1,000 you will not go to the UK and make a joke about any of that stuff, because you will not go to a foreign country and, in violation of their laws, speak out against what they've said not to speak out against. Do it. I dare you. $10,000. Cash in your pocket if you go to the UK and make a joke about Muhammad having a 12-year-old wife.
This we got here faster than I thought we would in this conversation.
What? Hypocrite? What, Tim?
Where you're shouting at me about something I don't understand.
Timothy, I'm so baffled. What? Let me furrow my brow. What? Islam criticism? Shut up, Adam. Honestly, you're not fooling anybody. Anybody who buys into the fact that Adam is thrown off or confused by this logical leap after Adam started talking about the value of freedom of speech and how he thinks it's great about the United States of America and it's something that should be enforced throughout the Western world, he gets asked a basic question about how the UK essentially arrests people for criticizing Islam, for criticizing immigrants and whatnot, and then all of a sudden it's comedy about Muslims. Shut up, Adam.
This we got here faster than I thought we would in this conversation. Where you're shouting at me about something I don't understand.
Again, Tim couldn't be more clear. He explains the link between what they were just talking about, how we ended up getting on this subject, and Adam is still feigning confusion. He's still like, what's happening? I'm so confused, Timothy. I don't know how we got here. I don't know how we got on that topic. And I do appreciate Tim at one point in time saying, let me unconfuse you and say it even simpler. But obviously, Adam Conover is pretending right here. This is make-believe, and this is what you see right now on display for us. And it really is a demonstration of his cowardice.
I don't really understand how
Yes,
you would think it's incumbent upon me.
Do you think anybody watching this right now thinks you are confused by the notion that in the UK you go to jail for mocking Islam?
I don't understand how we got onto you shouting at me about Islam specifically, I'd like to return to the point I was
it's
trying
because
to make.
you said people should be allowed to come to this country and
Yeah.
speak out against it. And you said you're
I think-
a comedian, and you're a
I
comedian, and you
think
go to
that-
other countries, right? And you said you go to the UK. And I said, okay, if you go to the UK, speak out in violation of their laws and see what happens. And you said, I'm confused. I don't understand. What don't you understand?
All the criticism I had for Tim for not bringing up the fact that deportation is not technically classified as a punishment under United States law, according to multiple different Supreme Court precedents, that goes away with him asking that specific question. Do you truly believe that anybody out there in the audience really believes that you're confused right now, Adam? That you don't understand the connection and what he's actually representing? Do you actually think that you playing dumb is actually going to make people out there in the audience be dumb? You think that them going, whoa, what is going to make people out there think that Adam is actually the intellectual in this conversation? Absolutely not. Ridiculous and absurd. And again, couldn't be a better call out in this moment.
Will you go to Turkey? Will you go to Turkey and speak out against Islam?
I mean, if I have a joke to make, sure. I don't have a joke about those particular topics.
You would.
I would.
You're saying if you had a joke about
Oh, yeah, sure. I would try to do the best I can. I always try to poke the bear as much as I can. It's part of the job of a comedian.
nothing to poke the bear
Because
about as it pertains to one of the world's largest religions. I mean, come on.
I mean, I haven't written a joke about that recently.
So again, Tim keeps pressing the issue right here, and Adam has a ridiculous notion where he's like, oh, I would definitely do that in the nation of Turkey. I would definitely do that in the United Kingdom. If only it were possible for me, Adam Conover, big brain comedian, in order to think of a joke related to that. But since you're asking me and I'm so confused, I'm just going to say, what, Tim? What?
All right. Then I
So
look
look,
forward to you going to the UK.
hey man, I'm a free speech guy, right?
And Adam again tries to pivot off of that, but Tim keeps hitting him on it. And to be clear, Adam Conover is not a free speech guy. He does not respect that American value. He does not expect that American value to be upheld in the Western world in the way that I do, because I like our First Amendment. I appreciate our First Amendment. I think it should be common law across the Western world, because the Western world has higher standards than a bunch of these other third world countries. But Adam ain't about that life. Adam is all about safe, edgy comedy. Adam is all about just, I'm going to make fun of Christians for the 800 millionth time. I'm going to do a joke like that. But I can't possibly, in my imagination, even think of the possibility of me thinking of a joke related to Islam. That's just not possible for me to do. I try to poke the bear wherever I go around the world, but I don't actually talk as a comedian about sensitive topics that would be poking the bear in the United Kingdom, because I'm an absolute coward. And to be clear, I don't even know if Adam Conover would be prosecuted in the United Kingdom for telling an Islam joke. But what I do know is that he would be persecuted by the very mob that he's trying to please. And that's the real reason why he wouldn't make that, because he's afraid of cancellation. Again, this guy is an absolute coward. He won't even get to the level where he would face down authoritarian laws from a government that would persecute him for his freedom of speech. In reality, he's afraid of the social media mob, because those are the people that he panders to in order to make his living.
Donald Trump dumped food into a fish pond after Shinzo Abe did. Why are you trying to make that a negative
I don't even
story?
know what that
it was
we're
like
talking about there.
It's all of these hoaxes. The very fine people hoax.
I mean, I remember the line. Yeah,
Trump never called Nazis fine people.
He said there were very fine people on both sides,
Except the neo-Nazis and white nationalists, who should be condemned totally.
He said that.
Holy shit. Brother,
I don't live in your bubble, man.
You don't live in the fucking news, dude. Come the fuck on. You don't read the fucking news. This is what fucking blows my mind.
No, I just don't have I don't have your
No,
obsessions.
Trump did not call neo-Nazis and white supremacists very fine people. Bro, it's been almost 10 years and you still think he did.
This is my other favorite part of the conversation, where Tim Pool starts running down a list of very obvious Trump hoaxes where the media ended up painting the evil orange man as a bad person, including the Shinzo Abe koi fish thing, where Trump is seen on video throwing a bunch of fish food into the pond, and people said that that was disrespectful, even though they were slowly feeding the fish in the video video prior to that, and then Shinzo Abe ended up doing that, instructing Trump to do it, and then they walked on in order to do whatever they were going to do in terms of a meeting, because their photo op of them feeding the koi fish was over. But of course, that leads into the very fine people hoax, and of course, Adam Conover, it's a purveyor of that hoax. He says right there, oh, he definitely said that, I remember him saying that, and then Tim says, except for the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, they should be condemned totally, and Adam's like, he said that? I don't know about that, is the implication through his tone, but let us be clear, and Tim, by the way, should have played the video for him, Trump definitely 100% did in fact condemn the neo-Nazis and white supremacists and said they should be condemned totally.
You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly.
Now, this is one of the biggest media hoaxes that there were out there at the time. Joe Biden launched his presidential campaign based on it, as Tim Pool points out.
That's
no,
what's
I
fucked
didn't
up.
say I think he did. I just don't know what you're talking about because I don't
Joe
I don't
Biden.
listen to your.
It's not about listening to my bro. It's reading the news. It's fact checking, bro. I got Snopes for you. They're not a conservative publication. Even Snopes was like, guys, stop saying this.
I don't know why you're shouting at me. I was just asking you to explain.
And Adam Conover, not 2 minutes before he pretends like he has no idea why Tim is getting angry at him over this, was just pushing that hoax.
Flashback.
I mean, I remember the line. Yeah,
Trump never called Nazis fine people.
He said there were very fine people on both sides.
A few moments later.
That's
No,
what's fucked
I
up.
didn't say I think he did. I just don't know what you're talking about.
And again, this is the guy whose entire shtick for years was that he would look into myths widely believed to be true and give you facts and evidence in order to refute that. But for whatever reason, Adam Conover, completely incapable of addressing the substance of this argument, completely incapable of looking into the information for himself. And then, like a coward, like a weasel, like he did previously when he was like, what? In this particular case, he feigns confusion, saying he doesn't know why Tim is pressing him on this issue, even though Adam was putting forward this version of events.
So when you guys were being paid by the Russian government, you didn't know.
We never got paid by the Russian government.
But the Russian government paid Tenet Media and they paid you.
They didn't.
They didn't pay you. I wanted
never
to know.
got paid by the Russian government.
Oh, but the
case,
okay.
as far as I know, has been dropped.
But I thought that you were making statements like, "Oh, we were the victims of
Should this prove to be true, we were defrauded and victimized." But I guess the challenge is right now, the Trump administration has no priority in going over a story they don't give a shit about. But the Biden admin dropped it.
Oh, okay, yeah. They didn't go forward on the prosecution.
So I don't know exactly. What I can say, and this is what the challenge is that my understanding is during the Biden administration, they dropped it.
Now, of course, this is the coup de grace for Adam Conover right here, where he talks about Tim Pool being paid for by the Russians. Russian puppet, paid for by the Russians. Remember that indictment where you took money from the Russians? You're such a bad guy. And this is what I really wanted to talk about, the fact that you're a puppet of the Russians. When in reality, again, if Adam Conover actually bothered to be remotely informed about this particular case, he would know is not true. It's weaselly for him to put it this way, because the worst case scenario that was alleged by the Department of Justice in the indictment of the two Russians that were giving money to Tenet Media was that Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan knowingly took money from the Russians, and essentially they lured in these other content creators into taking money by making them think that it was from some investment billionaire who was actually located in France. Again, that was the worst reading of the Department of Justice indictment, but as I went over in a video, in reality, there wasn't even enough evidence to support that Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan, her husband, were actually aware that they were being paid by the Russian government, and it was likely, or at least possible, plausible, that they were actually scammed by these same Russians as well, because essentially, as a condition for getting this money, this investment into a new media empire, they were going to have to work with a firm that had two Russians at the helm that would do all the in-between work between said billionaire billionaire investor, and of course, Lauren and Liam. And again, you might say, oh, well, that's still bad because you're working with Russian people, but this does not necessarily imply that they're working with the Russian government. And by the way, I actually got a text message from somebody who works at Tenet or used to work at Tenet indicating that the Department of Justice has completely dropped the investigation into Lauren and Liam at this moment in time. However, that is not confirmed by multiple independent sources yet, so we will wait and see on that.
I one of the reasons I wanted to come, I was just curious to see your operation here. You know, you're like
the money that we were paid by Tenet is completely negligible. Mm-hmm. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. I don't know how much you were getting paid for your shows. I mean, your shows were pretty big.
Yeah, that was in the days that cable still existed, you know, before it was all destroyed by.
But I mean, we do ad reads sometimes for $50,000.
Yeah.
So when the story came out, the insinuation was that like, oh, holy shit, Tim Pool is getting $100,000 to license a show.
Well, that was literally printed in the press that it was $100,000.
The indictment said it, and but I have no problem saying like, that we got a license for $100K. It was a market rate negotiated by lawyers. That's why Dave Rubin and several others in it negotiated the exact same rates, independent of us. You have to take a look at like, for instance, this show is on average 7th biggest live stream in the country. So like, what do you think you're going to sell an ad for on the 7th biggest live show in the country that pulls in hundreds of thousands, you know, between on a low day, 200, but maybe upwards of 500K for one episode? Well, with a 2-hour show, you could probably get in 4 or 5 ad reads at 10K each. So you're looking at, for one show, selling ads upwards of $50,000. And if we do premium buys, like Adam Conover, he's a big get. A clothing company wants to sponsor it because they know people are going to want to watch.
Oh, yeah.
We go to them and say, if you want an ad read, it's 50.
Yeah.
So singular episodes could actually run as high as 250.
That's 100, but every episode of your show being worth $100K, like how is an episode, how is a 2-hour podcast of people talking worth $100K license fee? How are they going to make more than $100K on it on the other end? It sounds like a crazy number.
Now, again, it was never alleged that any of the creators were knowingly taking money for the Russian government or that they were actually directed by the Russian government in order to say certain talking points, which, by the way, is not how these influence operations work. It's like working for Al Jazeera or working for Russia Today when that was a thing in the United States of America. These people hire those that already align with them rather than pay people to change their minds. That being said, of course, none of this has been proven out. And again, for Adam to be so disingenuous and to say, oh, well, that's a lot of money, that's a ton of money, when he used to be at College Humor, is absurd in every possible way. The way that these new media startups always work is you have a big person or a group of investors that are front-loading money. They end up onboarding a bunch of talent. Sometimes they overpay for that talent if you're looking at it in the most superficial way, and that is their mechanism to draw in audience in order to get subscribers under the theory that they will be profitable later. This is how the Daily Wire started. This is how Vox, this is how Vice worked. This is how a bunch of different companies worked, including College Humor, which of course received huge amounts, way more by the way, in venture capital investment in order to jumpstart what they hoped in the future would be a profitable enterprise. Now, Adam knows this from being in a similar position that Tim Pool was in at the time. Adam understands this because he's made a ton of money off of content that probably wasn't all that profitable for the investors. Adam understands that this is how BuzzFeed worked and all these different various companies. But again, he's feigning stupidity. He's feigning ignorance. He's on the cusp of going, ooh, what? Because he's so confused about this, even though in reality, he is not confused at all. He understands what's going on. And by the way, a bunch of different people pretend that they don't understand this business model, even though we look at companies every day, like The Blaze, like Daily Wire, like BuzzFeed, like Vice, like Fox, all these different various companies that got way more investment capital in them in the beginning in the first place, College Humor as well, and we pretend like that is just nowhere near the realm of possibility for a much smaller amount and paying this rate for certain creators.
They were just re-airing it on YouTube and Rumble, and it was going to be worth $100K an episode to them?
It already was generated.
Some Russian guys show up and they're like, we will give you $100K, and you're like, this is legit.
Russia was never involved. So a conservative personality who's been in the space for a decade, who worked for the Blaze Media, said, I've got funding for a startup. we want to license one of your shows. I licensed to Discovery. Should
Look, I take tons of dumb money. I've done dumb money gigs before. I'm like, I don't know why people are giving me this much money for this, but all right, if you want to do it.
And by the way, what makes this even funnier is that the conversations that Lauren Chen ended up having with these people that were representing this alleged billionaire who turned out not to exist were about how these people would not be short-term profitable, and Lauren was actually advising against onboarding them, which is kind of hilarious because if this was a Russian influence operation with Lauren Chen churning against the United States of America, wouldn't you expect her to understand that this was not actually about profitability? But again, it doesn't appear that they were actually involved in scamming people. That they got scammed as well is far more likely. And again, it is not unusual, especially in these digital media startups, especially in conservative media, for billionaires to be the people that are behind this. And I think the Gregorian guy might have had a fake net worth of around hundreds of millions of dollars, but regardless, it makes no matter. This is obviously what ends up happening a lot of the time in digital media, and nobody should be surprised by that. But everybody wants to pretend, because this one had the Russian angle, this one had the questionable funding angle, that this is somehow unusual or atypical. Nobody, by the way, talks about the infestation of Qatari money in left-wing media and all these different media platforms, how they end up putting all this money into these startups, because that would be Islamophobic or something of the sort. And by the way, that's much more money in terms of economies of scale. But if you bring that up, that all these different lefty creators that came up through Al Jazeera, through AJ Plus, are in reality puppets of the Qatari government, that would be immoral. How dare you say that? This is only applicable when it's this small amount of money. And of course, it's Russia. And by the way, it's a big amount of money to average everyday ordinary people. But make no mistake about it, in terms of investments for media startups, it's a small amount of money comparatively to what we've seen before. Now, I know many of you might be thinking, what? You're so confused, but in reality, you're not confused. Adam isn't confused. I explained this absolutely perfectly, and now I leave the question up to all of you out there in the audience. What do you think about this conversation? The full thing will be linked in the description of this video for you to check it out for yourself, but I want to know your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Adam Conover playing stupid throughout the whole course of this interview. Till next time.